So let me first talk about what is batch billing. So if you're an organization that wants to, like a lot of private clubs and organizations like to do, and I think the reason that a lot of people do this is that it just streamlines the billing process and the collection process of all of the members' payments. And that is to allow the member to go through an entire month, put all of their charges, whether it's point of sale, whether it's a lesson, whether it's a program registration or a reservation for courts, to put all of these charges on their account. And then at the end of the month, be able to generate very quickly a statement, or what we call an invoice, that will have all of those charges on there, send that invoice to that member or that player, and then allow the player an opportunity to either come in and pay it or store a payment profile on their account and be able to easily collect that. So that's the whole definition, or what batch billing is in its simplest form. And the way you set this up and the way you run a batch in CourtReserve is pretty simple. So once you turned it on, as Ashley showed you at the first, then you're going to get a new option here called batch billing under transactions. And so if you get to the end of the month, and most of our organizations are doing this batch billing process on the very first of each and every month. So if, let's say it's, you're in the first of the month and you now want to go in and generate all of your statements and invoices for the previous month, send them to your users and allow them to log in and pay. So what we're going to do here is, once we click on batch billing, you're going to see this is a historic record of all of my previous batches. So since this is our demo account, you can sort of see this is all of the batches that I've ran for this account through the history of time. So what I'm going to do now is start a new one though. So I'm going to simply click on that batch billing button. I want to make sure I get that. I covered that pretty quick. Create batch billing up here in the top right. I'm going to click that, and now I get a criteria page. So I'm going to set up my batch. So my billing person, my financial responsible person that's coming in here on the first, they're going to go, and it's really, once you learn this, it's really about 30 seconds to boom, 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 and kick off your batch. And so I'm going to walk through each one of these steps so it's very clear on what we can do. So memberships is just telling you, hey, do I want to collect everything, or do I just want to collect a subset of my member dues? So a lot of people don't like to do non-member stuff. So they just say, hey, just come in here and let me charge my memberships or my family members. But if you don't have non-members, or if you have, want everything to be included, whether or not it's regardless of membership type, then you would just leave this as all. Payment profile status is really a way for you to see and be able to choose who you want to bill based on if they have a profile or not. So our best practice is to leave this to all, because our system handles it both ways anyway. So if they have a payment profile, the email that goes out will say something to something like, here's your invoice. You have a payment on file, your payment will be processed on day X. But if they don't, it will give them some instruction to, hey, log into your member portal and pay before the due date. So it really doesn't need to be filtered, but we put that in here just so that you could see it. And if you did ever have a use case where you wanted to segment those, you could. The payment profile priority is for those organizations that use our payment provider. We now can process e-checks as well as credit cards. Now, this is one of those new things that you heard Ashley mention. Hey, we got some new things in batch billing. We have introduced a new payment provider. And some of you on the call may be like, I don't have this e-check. Well, that's because you're using a payment provider that doesn't support e-checks. So if you're interested and you're like, oh, my club is all about e-checks and direct debits, please just reach out to support and to Ashley and her team, and they will gladly connect you on how you can set that up. Okay. So if you are with a provider though right now and you're watching and you can support e-checks and credit cards, what this is telling you is if they have two accounts or two payment profiles on their account, one's a bank account and one's a credit card, give priority to the e-checks. And that's what most clubs do, because e-checks obviously are what? They're lower on the processing fees. So most of our clubs are allowing their batch billing or the bigger charges to come through as an e-check payment. Okay. Now, transactions through and reservation event through is super important here. This is basically telling the system, I don't want to charge or put anything on a statement that has not happened yet. So this is why we want to set these dates, so that basically you're saying, I only want to put on an account or this invoice all my transactions posted prior to February 1st and anything that has physically happened before February 1st. So this is a great way to sort of limit that. If you don't put these dates, then you're covering this, you're basically collecting for this balance, and they may have lessons or clinics that are a month from now or 2 months from now, and people don't want to pay for that stuff if it's 2 months away. So this is a way to control that. As you can see here, if you look at this grid, I have a current balance here for this account of 703, but my amount to process today is going to be 502. And the reason that's different is because of these dates. So that's meaning around approximately $200 is future charges. Okay, so hope that makes sense. So as you can see here, once I start selecting this grid here auto refreshes. And so as I exclude stuff or add stuff, you'll see more things come in here and go away. For example, if I was to do only process those that have payment profiles, you'll see the grid changes. Now I have 7 accounts, and only these 7 accounts are the ones I'm going to charge because it meets my criteria. So I'll change this back, and then I'll move to revenue categories. So revenue categories is here. Really, this is not utilized a lot, but I'm still going to explain it. Some people may be allowing charges to come through, and they only want to batch the, let's say, the membership dues. Everything else the customer is responsible for as they walk in or they need to log in and pay. So if that's you, then this is the way you can say, I only want to charge my membership dues. Now look at how this changed. So now the balances went way down, because now as I specify the revenue category of membership dues, it's only looking at the accounts, and it's only looking for the fee unpaid that is mapped to a membership due revenue category. So this is a way that you can sort of just knock out and batch bill certain parts of your fees without getting all of your fees into the batch. Okay. So I'm just going to, but again, this is very underutilized, or not. It's there for you to be, because CourtReserve is flexible. We like settings, but best practice is probably to leave this as all and collect everything in one batch. Okay. The exclude is great because, if you want to save, you don't want to charge, you really want to hit a card or bank draft for 14 cents or for $2. So if somebody has a low charge, you can always exclude and say, hey, we're only going to charge people. This is a very extreme example, but I just wanted to show you how this filter works. So you can see once I put the 500 here, none of the account balances that process less than 500 would appear. So it's just a way to limit that. So most people are maybe putting a $5 charge or a $10 charge. And that way, anything at less than $5 would be disregarded and not be sent. So it's just a way to, because as you get those lower amounts, that can be cents that you can save on a credit card transaction. Okay. The send invoice if amount to process is 0. So if you want to still send an invoice to someone that does not owe anything, this is how you would do it. So if I selected this, if I check this box, it would also generate invoices for any member or player that I'm sending to that does not currently have a balance to process. So it's just a way to say, hey, here's your invoice. There's nothing due. So, that's totally up to you and your business model, whether or not you want to do that. And then lastly is the invoice due dates. This is just a way to stamp the invoice to actually say, this is where I want my due date to be. So when they get the invoice, you can put net 30 days, 15 days, 5 days, whatever your policy is, that's what it's going to show on the invoice. And so if you change this, we actually show you what the due date here is, just to make sure that you're setting the right date here and you're not having to calculate it in your head. All right. Now, these next two are vitally important, because this is what's going to, this is what, trips up the people when they're first starting this for the first time. And you got 2 options when you run a batch. Again, most organizations are using option 1, the defaulted option. They want to generate and send out the statements. I keep saying statements, and Deborah's on the call, and she'll get understand why. That term it can be used both ways and mean different things to different people. But invoices is what I want to call it, because that's what they are in our system. Generate invoices only means I'm only going to send an invoice out and tell this player or member or family what they owe. And then I'm going to give them a period of time where they can actually, those that don't have payment profiles, and that's the reason you probably are going to do it. If they all have a payment profile on file, if you're an organization where you require a card on file, then there's no point in doing this, right? But the reason a lot of people and a lot of organizations do this is to give them a 5 to 10, 15-day grace period so that they receive their invoice, can view it, make sure everything is good. And then after those 15 or whatever those due dates are has elapsed, then the user can come back, the admin financial person can come back in and collect. And I'll show you that collection process in just a second. But if you do want to go ahead and generate and collect both at the same time, choose option 2, hit save. That's going to generate the invoice and immediately turn around and try to collect on it if a card is on file or a payment profile is on file. Okay. So for this demonstration, I'm going to actually just choose option 1 here. I have 43 accounts to process. I might try to limit that a little bit. So let's just say you just put the 500 back here. So that way we're not processing so many invoices and having to sit here and wait. It's really a quick process. I'm not doing it to do that. I just don't want to waste your time. So here we go. We're going to go ahead and save this. And what this is going to do, this is, I want to iterate something here. A lot of people get scared when they click this button, like if they close the browser window or if somebody else, our system is built, we've built safeguards. So if you kick off a batch and your power goes out, it's still running. It's in the background. So a lot of systems are very fragile, and you click the button. If you touch it in any way, you could kick off 2 batches, or if it fails in the middle, CourtReserve handles that. So there's peace of mind here to know when I click that button and it's off and doing its thing and processing, it can be sitting here. And for those, this one finished quick, right? But for organizations, I've seen this, or they have thousands of accounts, right? So it could take anywhere from, like mine, 10 seconds to minutes. And so just know that you won't lose anything if you close that tab or want to go leave it and go do something else. Okay. So now that it's finished, you can see that it started, it created these 7 invoices. And now I can go back and I can view batch billing, and I'm going to see it up here at the top. Now I have some statuses and some things that I can look at. So you can see here, it's going to tell me the date I created that batch. It's going to show me the person that created it on your team. It's going to show me the number of invoices I created, how much total I billed, how much I've already collected, how much is pending. Okay. And down here, when I click on this, I get a subset down here that I can see all of the criteria. So if somebody runs it and it looks like it generated more than it should, you can always go back here and see if you misselected something or put your filter in the wrong way. We historically we log this so that you can keep up with it. So now under invoices, you're going to see, if I click invoices, you're going to see these 7 invoices I created. Okay. Now this is the invoice status. There's multiple statuses an invoice can be in. It can be in paid. It can be in pending payment, payment declined, voided, and voided regenerated. I'll get into that in just a second on some of what these different statuses are. Okay. If it's in pending payment, that means it can either be collected by an admin. Somebody could walk in the door, give you a check and pay this invoice, or they could pay it online as well. Okay. Now, when they see the invoice and they get the invoice, this is what it's going to look like. Okay. It's actually going to be broken down like this. So we want to show you, or show the member or the player. They don't want to get an invoice and just see this. They're going to be like 10 private lessons. Well, I want to see my 10 private lessons. So this is really just a way for you to default the screen. But when they receive their invoice by email, they're going to see the full broken down invoice. And so they can see every private lesson, every clinic they were in, the date, and then the price. Okay. Now they can log in and pay for this, but in this example, it's part of batch billing. I want to show you how you can collect. So if I go back to batch billing, and now that I'm on this batch and I go back to details, I see this green collect payments button. So what this is going to do is when I click this collect payment button, this is what's actually going to go out and try to actually hit those that have a card on file and pay off the invoices. So if I do this, I'm not sure if there's any card on files for any of those that I pulled, but we're going to see. So now it's actually starting the payment processing. So one receipt. So yeah, so one invoice had a card on file. So it went out and grabbed the 502.86. These all were skipped because there were no cards on file. So those folks would either have to come in and pay you or they would have to log into the member portal and pay their invoice themselves. Okay. So if I go back to the batch billing tab now and look at this, you now see that I've collected those one. And now when I go to invoices, the one for the Owens family is going to be paid. Okay. Now, again, as a member, I think I'm on the Owens account here. I can always go to billing and go in and see my invoices. And so, darn it, I wish I would have shown you this before I collected it. So here's the one I just collected on due to having a card on file. Now, if this would have still been in a pending state, I would have had a pay button right here as well. So for all of those players that don't have a card on file, then this is how they can go in and pay. Okay. And it's, you know, it's super easy. We made it super easy. So they go into billing, they click invoices, they go right here to the invoices. They can click the details. They can see the breakdown. And for those that have it paid, you can see we're marking it. They can see paid. So there's no more of them having to come into the club, getting you to email them an invoice. This is also available in our mobile app. So on the mobile app, you can see this exact same information. You can even pay invoices from the mobile app. Now, if they need a hard copy, they can always download a PDF. Now, be mindful, they get this attached when the email goes out, when you do the generate part. But if they want a copy of this, they can always log into the member portal and download it themselves. Now, this is the consolidated version because I clicked it, but I can always do the breakdown if I wanted. Hit download now, and now I'm going to see a broken down version of that. And so now, you know, you don't even have to worry about them coming to you. Now, you can all at any time, if I search for a member and somebody calls you up, and let me go back to the member portal. I switched sides here. All right. So if I go back to Tim's account and go to billing info, so Tim calls up, has a question, there's an invoices tab here now. So for those that have batch billing turned on, you now see a new tab under billing info called invoices. So here's where I can click the invoices tab and see all of those invoices for that member or player. And if they have any questions on this, I can always go here to view it, to pay it, to void it. Okay. So here's where I could go in, and now I'm in their invoice, and I can even email that back to them if they called in and says, hey, I can't get to my member portal. Can you just email it to me? You obviously can do that as well. Okay. Now, a couple things before I end the call here is a lot of times people that run batch billing, the number one thing that people say is, why is all of a sudden Chris's email voided? And let me show you how you get into that state. So if Chris here has an invoice of $716 and I go in as a admin and I manipulate a fee or a fee for him that was on that invoice. Let's say I cancel something that I meant to cancel and didn't, or I override a fee price from $50 to $25 that I forgot to do, then it's going to automatically void this invoice. Okay. And then what's going to happen is you're going to have a regenerate button that you can choose and click right here that will automatically regenerate an invoice for you for any family member or any family account if you ever get into that scenario. That's actually a new feature that we just recently added. That's another one that Ashley wanted me to mention as far as new. That's a huge feature. I might can get in that scenario real quick. So if I go into Chris's account here, let's just go into Chris's account. I think I can show you, and it may be easier if you sort of see this. And so if I go into his family account and I look at, so let's see here, private lesson on 12/29. So if I go here and let's just manipulate this fee and change this down to, oh, yeah. So this one is another one. I'm glad I did this first. So this account, so I have this set up so that I can't manipulate anything that's going to adjust a fee. So we sort of protect you from doing this. So basically, if if you have an invoice out there, we don't allow you to pay it. But what happens is somehow they come in here and you cancel a reservation, or let's say it rained and you don't have this private lesson and you need to cancel it. If I go ahead and void this, then now that particular lesson is off of the account. But guess what? He still has the invoice in his hand that shows it. So now that invoice is no longer valid. So now if I go over here, there's a job that's running, and now you can see this, it runs every minute. In a minute, this will go change to voided. But what it's going to look like is this right here. It's going to show voided. And so then when you go into the batch, you have the ability to go ahead and regenerate this, and it will take that previously canceled fee off and send them a new invoice with the new amount that doesn't include that fee. So I just wanted to make sure that those that are on the call hear that, because that's probably the number one support we get is, why is this invoice voided? And it's because you've manipulated some transaction that no longer exists on the CourtReserve side, but you still have an outstanding, and it would not be right for us to leave that invoice out there in a pending payment state that was no longer valid. Okay. Ashley, is there any questions that have came in? I know I've done a lot of talking. I know that was a lot of information. And just be mindful, if you guys do choose to use batch billing, we will actually get on a call with you guys and actually show you and run through the first batch with you to make sure that this is all clear. So just know that it's something that we do as a company to make sure that your first couple batches are running smoothly.
Sure. And some of these you may have answered already, but regenerate invoice, you've already gone over that.
Yes. And I don't think the reason I'm not seeing it here is because I don't think since this is not a live client, it's not running the job to void the invoice. So, but yeah, right here, this would say voided, and there would be a regenerate button right here. And if you simply click that, then what that's going to do is actually regenerate that same invoice, take it from a voided state and put it back into a pending payment with the new amount associated with it.
So Deborah asked, how will it look if they haven't paid for a previous invoice?
That's the great question. You cannot stack invoices. So if they don't pay the previous, when you run the next batch, then you all of a sudden got 2 months worth of charges on that second invoice. Okay. So you're not going to be able to generate an invoice if there's any pending that you pull in, then that pending one gets voided and all the charges go to the new invoice. Okay.
And then she asked, can we send invoices from an individual profile?
Oh, that's a great question, Deborah. And that is something that we are actively working on. So we're not only going to allow you to generate an invoice, and Deborah's going to like this answer, we're also going to allow you to generate statements. So for those that don't want to generate an invoice, but just want to show a statement to say, on a certain date, here's all your charges, here's your payments, here's what your balance is, you're also going to be able to generate one of those and send that at the family or individual player level. Okay.
Deborah said you need statements. Deborah just said you need statements.
I think she made a statement that we need statements.
Okay. So Anne asked, does generate invoice trigger an email to the member or just the notification on their account?
No, so great question, Anne. So when they get a and I may have it, but I better not open up a personal email. So they will get an email when you generate, and they will also get an email when you collect, and they'll have a payment receipt in there as well. And they also get an email if they decline, or if you're using e-checks, and after, let's say it goes 6 days, we have a 10-day job that we run every night for if any check is returned for insufficient funds, we will send them an email letting them know that they had a return check. We will send you an email letting you know you had a return check as an admin, and then we will revert the invoice and mark it unpaid and revert all of the payment and revert and set the fees back to unpaid. So we also handle all of that as well for those that are using e-checks.
That's good. Okay. Deborah asked, when it's paid, what does it look like in the member profile and on the court sheet?
Well, we don't show invoices on the court sheet at all. So if they pay, so all invoices, think of invoices for those in the audience, an invoice is just a container of fees. So it's nothing more than that. So you're not, even though you're technically paying the invoice, you're really just, it's just a container holding a bunch of unpaid fees that you're paying at one time. So when you pay that invoice and there's fees on there that were previously unpaid that are now paid because you paid this invoice, then everything on the court sheet that had a fee related to it that was paid will just be marked paid. And as far as what the member sees on their profile, that it goes back to what I just showed previously. You go to billing, you go to invoices, this is how they see it. They go to details, they see paid.
Okay. So does the regenerate option only show up when you are unsuccessful in collecting payment, or as soon as it's voided?
As soon as it's voided. It's only, regenerate only shows up for voids. It does not show up for payment declines, because a payment decline, the invoice is still valid, right? It's just the payment was refused. So we don't void those because a lot of times people's credit cards have expired expiration dates. We don't want to touch the invoice there. They just come in, correct their payment profile, and then click pay, or you click pay, and then they get their money. So we don't want to void anything. The only time we void is if you manually void. Now, I didn't really show that, but you can, if you want to manually void it, you can always do that. So at any time, if I go here and I go back to the admin and go back to my batch, and I don't know when you ever would, but if you do want to say, hey, I want to manually void this invoice, I could always click here and, oh, so this is the one that's already regenerated. So it did regenerate. So I just need to refresh my page. So right here is the one that I changed. Remember on Chris where I changed? So here's that regenerate button. Okay, I'm glad it showed. Now I can show you a couple more things. So when I click regenerate, so remember before it was $716. So I went in and canceled that $60, $70 lesson, and now looks what the amount to process is. So the system recalculates everything. And when I click this, I can just go ahead, since they have a card on file, I can just click this, hit regenerate. It will immediately regenerate, immediately send it to the user, and immediately charge for that $654.50 without me having to do anything else. And then it immediately go from voided to paid. Now, if I just wanted to regenerate and send them the statement to give them some days to pay it, then I could do that. It would still do the process that it did before, use all the previous parameters that was part of this batch, and just reissue that invoice with the new amount. Okay. Now, if I have a pending invoice and I need to, for whatever reason, all these are voided, seems like. So if I have a previous invoice, or if I have an invoice on file that I need to void, I can always go to it and actually click the void button beside the pay. I just don't have any in that state right now.
Okay, let's see. That was from Tiffany, by the way. Sorry, Tiffany. I didn't give you props for your question. Deborah asked, we want them to still be able to charge reserve courts while we wait for the payment, not to freeze their account and have to void the current invoice. Has this been updated? No,
that's just not the way CourtReserve is designed to work. So we can have that discussion offline, Deborah.
Okay. So if they pay for a court reservation and it's on the invoice, what does it look like on the scheduler when it shows that it's been paid?
It's just like anything else that's been paid. The $sign goes away. The red bar at the top goes away.
Okay. Anne asked, what happens if they don't pay by the due date?
Nothing. Basically, nothing will happen. It will just basically be in an unpaid state. The only thing that it will do, though, is if you're billing for membership dues as part of that invoice, and as part of your membership dues, if you have the membership price here, if you have this set to say 10 days, suspend the account, if membership dues is part of what you're billing, then the member would no longer be able to actually access the event module and book a court until they paid that fee, or until they paid that invoice, because that membership does suspend. But if you don't have membership dues, there's nothing that's going to just do anything. That invoice will just stay out there as unpaid. And then when you ran your next batch, it goes back to Deborah's original question, what happens if there's unpaid from batch to batch? It will just roll all of those unpaid charges into the new invoice.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit the Knowledge Base for articles with more questions. We are always here to reach out and talk to you on our chat support as well.